Man, I've done like 3 videos on the week before. You'd think I'd run out of stuff to talk about by now, but I've still got more. This book is legitimately one of the most lore-dense things this series has ever received. But I'm definitely gonna need a break from this book soon. So what's the deal with the book today? Well, if you read into what it says about the FNAF 1 animatronics, a narrative about them starts to be highlighted. And that narrative might just bolster the theory MoltenMCI. So what is that, and what narrative throughline am I talking about? Well, slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. We should probably start with MoltenMCI because a lot of these theory names kind of get thrown out there and I don't want to lose anybody. God forbid I just start saying things like Paper Pal BV disproves Shatter Victim just to bolster Golden Trio. Especially if you consider Oswald Dad Bully pretty handily disproves Renner Bully, which then allows Renner SD, which makes way for Mystic Vanessa. Who knows what that's supposed to mean? I do, but I'm not mentally well. So let's take it back to MoltenMCI. The theory essentially boils down to Molten Freddy being composed of the souls of the missing child incident victims. So how do we get there? FNAF 6 had an interesting but known roster of animatronics for the most part. Scraptrap is literally credited as William Afton in the game and the character encyclopedia, so that's pretty done and done. Scrap Baby looks a lot like a scrapped circus baby and sounds just like Elizabeth did back in Sister Location. And, you know, Henry says Elizabeth, so that's again pretty solid. Lefty on the surface seems strange, but looking at this render in the alleyway and the blueprints we get for the animatronic, it's pretty clear that Lefty is specifically built to capture and contain the marionette, which it seems to by the beginning of FNAF 6. All of these are pretty unambiguous. And then we get to Molten Freddy, this freak made out of wires and eyes. So what exactly are they? Well, we do have a sort of origin that came out just before FNAF 6. A conversation between the source code of scottgames.com and fnafworld.com. These websites were seemingly talking to each other, and we got this dialogue from it.
You are crowding us. Be quiet. You can't tell us what to do anymore. Yes, I can. You will do everything that I tell you to do. We outnumber you. That doesn't matter, dummy. We found a way to eject you. You would be lost without me. Haha! Say goodbye to our friend.
So who is this conversation between? Well, one of the speakers is almost definitely Circus Baby. The dialogue links up very closely to how Circus Baby talks to us, even down to calling us dummy.
Do you know why they call it the scooping room? It's because, dummy, this is the room where they use the scooper.
So if that's true, who did Circus Baby get ejected from? Well, we can assume and make inferences, but we don't even have to do that. Just track back to where Circus Baby was before FNAF 6. By the end of Sister Location, Circus Baby and all of the Funtimes had exited their exoskeletons and formed into one massive heap of endoskeleton, wires, and eyes, named Ennard. Ennard scooped out the insides of Michael Afton and wore him like a reverse Gundam. But before too long, Michael's body began to rot, so they had to exit the body and flee into the sewers. So we know that before FNAF 6, Circus Baby was MIA within a mass of wires and eyes. Sound familiar? If they were all one joint unit and Circus Baby was ejected from that unit, then what we would have left would be Molten Freddy, that mass of wires and eyes. Not to mention, haha, say goodbye to our friend lines up pretty well with the manic way that Molten Freddy talks in FNAF 6. So it's pretty definitive, obviously not confirmed, but you know, very rarely in this franchise ever is, but it's very definitive that Molten Freddy is the hobbled together remains of Ennard after Circus Baby was split off, aka the remains of the Funtime Animatronics. So the question becomes, if Molten Freddy can be traced back to the Funtime Animatronics, what makes up them? Well, that's where the debate for Molten Freddy really comes in. It seems pretty clear that either the Funtimes were horribly, terribly, incredibly poorly programmed, or they're haunted, they're possessed. Even within the Sister Location bunker, they're incredibly aggressive and willing to attack anything on sight, not to mention the way they talk after they escaped. So what is possessing the Funtime Animatronics? Some people argue it's random children we never met. After all, the Funtimes were designed specifically to be perfect child kidnappers, and they're rented out to parties all the time, so it could be any of those kids from any of those parties. But the line "one big happy family" to me implies that Molten Freddy is a character we know that would know the Aftons. So if it is someone we know, well, there's a device that can help make that happen. The scooper in Sister Location is confirmed to also work as a remnant injector, based off of the blueprints from FNAF 6. Real quick side note, in case anyone doesn't know, in Five Nights at Freddy's, remnant is specifically the mixture of soul or spiritual energy and metal. It can be melted down and manipulated in various ways. Typically, the spiritual energy or memory, what have you, is positive in nature, and remnant has many positive abilities, like being able to heal. Regardless, if you melt it down, you can inject it into other larger metals, like animatronics, and have the spirit that was originally in the remnant possess the new material. It's a way to transfer ghosts scientifically. In the third FNAF novel, The Fourth Closet, a naming convention that is never confusing, William Afton is explicitly injecting the remnant of the missing child incident victims into the Funtime Animatronics. He literally melted the FNAF 1 animatronics into one large creature and is extracting remnant from it to inject into the Funtimes, in order to better control and manipulate them. This isn't subtext, this is literally the text. The major question though is, does this happen in the games? After all, the Silver Eyes trilogy is not within the game's timeline, even though they share a similar world. Well, we don't have a definitive or confirmed source of the remnant in the Funtime Animatronics, so what is my theory? It does have to go one step further back to FNAF 2. In FNAF 2, the original animatronics are kept in a back room and used for spare parts for the toys, the original animatronics being possessed by the missing child incident victims. It's my belief that the use of these spare parts into the toys transfers some of that spiritual energy, or remnant, into the toy animatronics, which is why they start acting strangely. After the events of FNAF 2, while the originals are kept in safekeeping, the toys are scrapped and are therefore unaccounted for. William Afton would then be able to take those for his own uses, aka melting down the toys and injecting them into the Funtimes. This is where the original MCI remnant would be added to the Funtimes, but it's my belief that at this point they are too animalistic and hard to control. After enough experiments, he decides he needs more. So we then cut later to after FNAF 1, when Freddy's is officially shut down for good. William sneaks into the restaurant and breaks into the safe room, giving himself a sort of buffer for the animatronics. Then, night after night, he leads an animatronic back, waits until they confuse their programming, and disassembles them, taking much of it back to the Sister Location bunker to melt down to add to the Funtimes. After several nights of this, much more of the MCI remnant has been added to the Funtimes, but they are still too hard to control. Well, going off of the movie and the books, William seems to think that the Spring Bonnie suit has some dominion over the missing child incident victims. So, on the 5th night, he goes back to that safe room to retrieve the Springlock suit. But it's in that night where he fails and dies within the Springlock suit, becoming Springtrap. This is the point, I believe, where Sister Location happens. The Funtime Animatronics have grown restless and even more isolated until Michael Afton goes down to do what William couldn't finish. However, when he's down there, the Funtimes reunite into one mass, Ennard, and they use the scooper to empty out Michael and wear him out. But of course, Michael's body begins to rot and they have to escape into the sewers. And after enough time, the missing child incident victims have a revelation about Elizabeth Afton being in Ennard.
She doesn't even go here.
Do you even go to this school?
So they split up into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, and then we have FNAF 6. You know what's weird? If you like FNAF, there's a good chance you like Pokemon too. I don't know why, but the fandoms are pretty close. Well, if you like Pokemon, starting tomorrow at noon, every week on Saturday, the second channel, Rytoost, will have a 10 to 15 minute video all about Pokemon or Nintendo. Not like a Let's Play, but more so theories and meta talk and rankings and things like that. Here's a quick example of the one coming out tomorrow. Is there a really cool and awesomely designed Pokemon with terrible stats? That's a candidate for the worst one. Is it just an abomination to mankind? It's also on the list. I'm really proud of this, and it's a whole new direction I'm taking the second channel, so I hope you'll be there with it. Like I said, the first video comes out tomorrow at noon. Probably not going to shut up about this for a while. So if that's my theory, what did the week before do to bolster it? Well, that comes down to the findings that Bronwyn Light shares with Ralph. In case anyone still isn't caught up, The Week Before is the newest book in the FNAF franchise. It's a choose-your-own-adventure style book set the week before FNAF 1. The back of the book pretty directly states that it takes place within the game's timeline. You play as Ralph. the phone guy, doing his week of a night shift on his last week of working at Freddy's. A junior reporter, Bronwyn Light, has also been investigating the FNAF 1 Freddy's location and gives her information to Ralph via a voicemail. According to Bronwyn, and in some of the endings we can play through, this proves to be true, the FNAF 1 animatronics have grown restless by this time, and they want nothing more than to get out of the pizzeria. They're tired of being stuck in here and they want to escape. Their plan is actually to redirect power to their charging pads, save up extra battery power, and just leave, never to come back. In fact, this book gives the animatronics a lot more intelligence and personality and intent than we've ever seen. But the question becomes, if the FNAF 1 animatronics are so desperate to leave the FNAF 1 Freddy's Pizzeria, is there any other examples of animatronics desperate to escape? Well, yes, directly in the Funtime Animatronics. They were so desperate for freedom, they hollowed out somebody's body to hide inside of it to escape. And when that began to fall apart, they escaped to the sewers rather than come crawling back. So once again, we have animatronics that just want freedom. And with that in mind, a narrative through line starts to form. So let's pop our mixture into the oven and see what kind of horrors rise. For years, the missing child incident victims live on after their death, possessing the animatronic suits that their bodies rot inside of. But over the years, they've grown restless. They want freedom. They want something new. They want out. But freedom never comes. They get close once, but Ralph, one of the longest Fazbear employees, prevents them from doing so. And before they get another attempt, FNAF 1's Freddy Fazbear Pizza is shut down. And even in that moment, they're not offered rest or peace. William Afton comes back to collect, disassembling them and disrespecting them one last final time. For a moment, peace seems to be at hand, but they're trading one prison for a worse one, as they've been melted down one by one and injected into the fun times. Sure, they're rented out during the day and get to see the light then, but they're kept in an underground bunker, electrocuted and experimented on. They want out. They want out so badly, they hollow out Michael Afton and escape through his body, hoping to keep their cover for a bit, but his body rots too quickly. They make a break for the sewers. While at this time they're physically free, there's something still controlling them in Afton. Elizabeth Afton, thinking she can pilot the body as though she is the owner of it. They don't want to be controlled. They don't want to be led around on strings. They want out. This time, they eject her out, and they finally get a taste of true freedom. It's in the shadows and at night, but it's freedom. But that freedom is fleeting, for soon they're lured to the FNAF 6 location, a fake pizzeria built to hold and destroy them. And in that fire, their remnant and souls are finally laid to rest, but their agony remains. Agony that still, to this day, wants out. Agony that infests the burnt rubble and amasses the surrounding agony of the location, even more so when a pizzaplex is built on top of it. Eventually, that tangle of agony and anguish begins to lash out. It begins to attack anyone nearby, but even still, it wants out. And by the beginning of Ruin, we see that wish finally fulfilled, as the Tangle is escaping the pizzaplex that is now in ruin. They finally did it. They're out. The only question remains, for how long? I think this is one of the cleanest narratives that's emerged around the missing child incident victims. But what do you think? Are you still unconvinced on MoltenMCI? After all, there's a lot to still explain about the animatronics themselves. There might even be something else attached to them, but I'll save that for another video. Don't forget that tomorrow is the first video in the new wave of second channel Pokemon videos, so go and check that out. It'll be tomorrow at noon. If you're watching this on Sunday, it's already out. If you want your fan art featured on the channel, make sure to share it with #ToastArt. A huge thank you to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.